120,000 years ago, somewhere in the Middle East, a human being died, and the people around them did something no other animal on Earth had ever done before. They dug a hole. They placed the body inside, and they covered it up, not because they had to, not because it was practical, but because something inside them could not just walk away. That moment, 120,000 years ago, was the first time death meant something more than just the end. And what ancient humans did next will completely change how you think about the people who came before you. Before we talk about rituals and burials and grief, we need to talk about something nobody likes to say out loud. Dead bodies smell. Within hours of death, decay begins. Within days, it is overwhelming. Within weeks, scavengers arrive. Wolves, hyenas, vultures, drawn to the smell from miles away. For early humans living in small bands of 20 or 30 people, a dead body in camp was not just emotionally devastating. It was a survival problem. The smell attracted predators. The decomposition spread disease. The flies came fast. Something had to be done. Most animals solve this problem the same way. They leave. A wolf pack moves on. Elephants eventually walk away. Chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, will sometimes carry a dead infant for days, grooming it, refusing to put it down. But eventually they abandon it. No animal on Earth except one ever came back. No animal except one ever dug a hole first. That animal was us. Scientists do not fully understand why humans started burying their dead. The honest answer is that nobody knows for certain. But we have clues. And those clues tell a story that is far stranger and far more human than anyone expected. The oldest confirmed human burial we have ever found is approximately 120,000 years old. It was discovered in a cave system in Israel called Qafzeh. Inside that cave, researchers found the bodies of at least 15 individuals, men, women, and children, deliberately placed in the ground. Not scattered, not abandoned, placed. One of them, a child of about 12 years old, was buried with the antlers of a deer tucked carefully into their arms. Someone chose those antlers. Someone carried them into the cave. Someone laid them in the arms of a dead child before covering them with earth. That child has been dead for 120,000 years, and we still do not know what those antlers meant to the person who placed them there. But we know they meant something. You do not carry deer antlers into a cave and place them in a dead child's arms unless something inside you insists that it matters. That insistence, that feeling that death requires a response, is one of the oldest things about being human. It predates agriculture. It predates written language. It predates every civilization that has ever existed on this planet. Before we built anything, before we grew anything, before we wrote anything down, we buried our dead. Here is where the story gets strange, because humans were not the only ones doing this. In the Zagros Mountains of northern Iraq, there is a cave called Shanidar Cave. Inside that cave in 1960, a researcher named Ralph Selecki made a discovery that shocked the scientific world. He found Neanderthal skeletons, our ancient cousins, a completely different species, buried in the ground. But that was not the shocking part. Around one of the skeletons, Selecki found pollen. Enormous amounts of pollen. Pollen from 8 different species of wildflowers. Hyacinths, grape hyacinths, groundsel, bachelor buttons, yarrow, all of them in full bloom when they were placed in that grave, more than 60,000 years ago. Something had gathered armfuls of flowers and laid them over a dead Neanderthal before covering the body with earth. For decades, scientists argued about it. Some said the pollen got there by accident, carried by burrowing rodents or wind. Others said Selecki was right. The debate went on for 60 years. Then, in 2020, a new team returned to Shanidar Cave. They found a brand new Neanderthal skeleton buried in the same location, with the same dense clusters of ancient pollen around it. The probability of it being accidental twice dropped to almost nothing. Neanderthals buried their dead with flowers, a species that scientists once called brutish, unintelligent, barely conscious. They stood over a grave 60,000 years ago and placed flowers on someone they had lost. They felt something, and whatever they felt, it looked a lot like grief. Once early humans started burying their dead, they did not stop at just the body. They started putting things in the ground with them. And the things they chose tell us almost everything we know about what they believed. In a cave in Israel called Eskul, about 100,000 years ago, one individual was buried with a wild boar jaw placed carefully on their chest. In Russia, a 24,000-year-old child was found buried with thousands of mammoth ivory beads sewn into their clothing and two mammoth ivory spears placed alongside them. That clothing would have taken hundreds of hours to make. Someone spent hundreds of hours decorating the burial clothes of a child they were about to put in the ground forever. In Italy, a 23,000-year-old burial was found where a man had been covered with red ochre, a bright red mineral powder, painted across his entire body before burial. Red ochre burial appears again and again across ancient sites on every continent. In Africa, in Europe, in Australia, in the Americas. Different peoples, separated by oceans and tens of thousands of years, all independently decided that the right thing to do with a dead person was to cover them in red before putting them in the ground. Nobody knows exactly why, but red is the color of blood. Red is the color of life. Perhaps they were trying to give it back. Now comes the part of this story that is harder to tell, because not all ancient humans responded to death with flowers and red ochre and ivory beads. Some of them responded very differently. And the evidence for it is sitting in museums right now, in bones that have been studied for decades. In a cave in France called Mungo, researchers found Neanderthal bones from about 100,000 years ago. The bones had cut marks on them, deliberate, precise cut marks in exactly the same places you would make them if you were removing meat from bone. The skulls had been cracked open at the base, exactly the way you crack open an animal skull to get to the brain inside. Neanderthals ate each other. Not just once, not just in starvation, but in multiple sites across Europe. Researchers have found the same evidence in Spain, in Belgium, in Croatia. Cut marks, broken bones, skulls open from the bottom. And here is the part that makes archaeologists most uncomfortable. The same sites often contain both deliberate burials and evidence of cannibalism. The same people, the same caves, the same time period, which means early humans were doing both, burying some of their dead with flowers and ivory and red paint, and consuming others. Sometimes the same group did both. Sometimes possibly to the same person at different times. Researchers believe some of it was ritualistic, eating a person to absorb their strength, their spirit, their power. Some of it was survival, and some of it may have been something else entirely, something we no longer have a framework to understand. But here is what scientists keep coming back to. The thing that matters more than the flowers or the bones or the red ochre or any specific ritual. It is the grief itself. Humans are not the only animals that grieve. Elephants return to the bones of their dead for years, touching them with their trunks. Dolphins have been observed carrying dead calves for days. Chimpanzees mourn. Crows hold what look like funeral gatherings around their dead. Grief, it turns out, is not uniquely human. But what humans did with their grief is unique. Humans turned grief into ritual. They turned ritual into belief. And belief into the most powerful force in human history. The moment the first human looked at a dead body and thought there must be something after this, that was the moment religion was born. Not in a temple, not in a scripture, in a cave. Every religion that has ever existed, every belief in an afterlife, every prayer ever spoken over a grave, all of it traces back to that first moment when a prehistoric human looked at death and refused to accept that it was simply the end. Death in the ancient world was also not always a single event. For many early cultures, the relationship with a dead body did not end at burial. In many cases, it was just beginning. There is a site in Spain called Cima de los Huesos, the Pit of Bones, deep inside a cave system, accessible only by crawling through narrow tunnels in complete darkness. Researchers found the bones of at least 28 individuals, all of them thrown, one by one, down a 20-foot shaft. The bones are 430,000 years old, older than modern humans. Whatever species put them there, they were not Homo sapiens. And yet, they carried 28 bodies deep into a mountain, through passages too narrow to walk upright, just to drop them into a hole in the earth. There was no practical reason to do this. It could only have been done for reasons that mattered to them, reasons we can no longer fully read. In other sites around the world, ancient humans dug up their dead after burial. Bones were cleaned, painted, and kept. Skulls were displayed in homes. In some cultures, the bones of ancestors were passed down through generations like heirlooms. The dead were not gone. They were still part of the community, still consulted, still present, still powerful. The idea that death is a clean separation between the living and the dead, that is a modern idea. The oldest known cremation on Earth was found in Australia. A woman, burned approximately 42,000 years ago on the shore of a lake. Her bones deliberately smashed after burning, then gathered and buried. Researchers called her Mungo lady, found in Australia. which means the people who cremated her had walked out of Africa, crossed thousands of miles of unknown land, reached the edge of an entirely new continent, and still, they carried with them the knowledge that the dead deserved fire. Cremation spread independently across multiple cultures on multiple continents. People who had never met, who spoke no common language, who had no contact with each other, all arrived at the same conclusion, that burning a body meant something. That fire was the right response to death. Why? Nobody knows for certain. But fire purifies. Fire transforms. Fire takes something solid and turns it into smoke that rises and disappears into the sky. Perhaps that was the point. Perhaps the smoke was the soul. Here is the part that scientists find most extraordinary. The elaborate way ancient humans dealt with death tells us something surprising about how they understood life. To bury a person with grave goods, with their spear, their jewelry, their food, means you believe they will need those things somewhere. It means you believe death is not an end, but a journey. It means you believe the person who died is still, in some sense, a person. Still capable of needing things. Still capable of feeling cold or hungry or lonely. The spear in the grave is not just an object. It is a statement. It says, wherever you are going, we want you to be okay. For most of human history, every person who ever lived believed in some version of this. The specific beliefs were different. Different afterlives, different gods, different rituals. But the core belief was the same. Death was not the end. The dead were not gone. They still existed somewhere, in some form, and the living had responsibilities toward them. That belief, in its hundreds of thousands of different forms, shaped every civilization that has ever existed on this planet. It built the pyramids. It built Stonehenge. It built every temple, every cathedral, every monument humans have ever constructed. All of it, at its root, traces back to that first prehistoric human who looked at a dead body and said, "This cannot simply be the end. There is a woman buried in a cave in Israel who died 12,000 years ago. Researchers call her a shaman. She was elderly, 50 years old, which was ancient in that world. She had been buried with extraordinary care. Around her body, 50 tortoise shells. The pelvis of a leopard, the wing of an eagle, the tail of a cow, the foot of a human, not hers, placed deliberately near her head. She had been laid in a grave that someone had dug specifically to fit her, on her side, her hand resting near her face, as if she were simply sleeping. Someone dug that grave 12,000 years ago. Someone chose every one of those objects. Someone carried a leopard pelvis and an eagle wing and 50 tortoise shells deep into a cave. Someone stood over that grave after it was filled and felt something so large that we still cannot fully name it. We call it grief. We call it love. We call it belief. But those are just words. The feeling itself, the feeling that makes a human being gather flowers for a grave, or paint a body red, or crawl through darkness to lay someone to rest in the deepest part of a mountain. That feeling has no name that fully captures it. It is just the thing that makes us human. The thing that has always made us human. The thing that was already there, fully formed, before we built the first city, before we planted the first seed, before we wrote the first word, the next time you stand at a graveside, the next time you light a candle for someone you have lost, the next time you feel that enormous, wordless thing that death does to the people left behind. You are doing exactly what the first human did. You are doing what Neanderthals did in a cave in Iraq 60,000 years ago. You are doing what a family did in the Australian outback 42,000 years ago, standing around a fire on the edge of a lake that no longer exists. You are not separate from those people. You are continuous with them. The grief you carry is the same grief they carried. The love that makes you stand at a grave is the same love that made them dig one. Nothing has changed. Not in 120,000 years. Not really. Because the thing that makes death hard, the thing that makes it require flowers and fire and red paint and ivory beads and tortoise shells and songs and prayer, that thing is not a ritual. It is not a belief. It is not a religion. It is just love. And love is the oldest thing about being human. Older than language, older than fire, older than every tool we ever made. It was the first thing. And it is still the only thing that makes death impossible to simply walk away from, just like it was 120,000 years ago. In a cave, in the dark, with a child, and a pair of deer antlers, and someone who could not just leave,